On guys, all right, a few weeks ago we did our running back edition of this show, and tonight we're doing wide receivers. We got a great guest coming on tonight, so stay tuned.
Fantasy football, you dealing with the best. Keep it hype, authentic, this ain't nothing like the rest. With the Armchair Fantasy Show podcast, give advice for all the listeners to improve your stats. Yeah, we live on goingfor2.com. Tuesdays and Fridays, this is what you want. Talking dynasties and daily drafts, and we just getting started, that ain't even the half. Yeah, so go ahead, tell your friends to join. Going for two, cause no one remembers the extra point. Hey, goingfor2.com, the Armchair Fantasy Show.
What's going on, guys? All right, welcome to episode 157 of the Armchair Fantasy Show. I'm your host, of course, Jeff Lambert. You can follow me on Twitter at JeffLambert77. We are live every Wednesday night on Facebook Live, Periscope, and YouTube, syndicated on all major podcast networks, and of course, streaming in the Going for Two app for iOS and Android. I'm here as always with my co-host, Mr. Ryan Searfoss. Ryan, how you doing tonight, man?
Good, man. Back-to-back nights podcasting. I think you did that too, didn't you?
Mine's tomorrow. I booked myself way too much. I actually have two tomorrow night, and I have one on Sunday, so it's going to be interesting. Ooh, nice. Yeah, the wife doesn't know yet.
Hopefully tonight will get more positive in team previews. I kind of just hated way too hard on the Jags and kind of felt bad after.
Yeah, you got to remember when you do those team previews, typically you have fans of that team watching, so you got to be somewhat nice to them or they don't like you.
I might not have a Jags fan say a nice thing to me for the rest of the day.
All right, good stuff. All right, this next guy's intro is going to take me about 20 minutes to get through here. Chris Allen, he writes for 4for4, numberFire, DLF, and he's the co-host of the Dynasty Owners Manual podcast. Chris, man, how you doing tonight?
Oh, fellas, I mean, what a better time shortly before, assuming we get a season, fingers crossed, to be talking about fantasy football, whether Dynasty redraft. I mean, 'tis the season, right? I mean, you're either gearing up for their redraft in their home leagues and whatnot. I mean, folks are still trying to get some dynasty startups like going on. Best ball is still a thing right now. So it's a good time in the fantasy industry to be talking about football. So I'm happy to be doing with y'all tonight.
Good stuff. And I don't know if y'all know or not. I'm on the committee for DraftKings, but DraftKings now has best ball. So those of y'all DraftKings people out there, go onto your app. They do now have best ball. We had a conference call about it today. There will be some new features coming out pretty soon, so be on the lookout for that. But if you play best ball, DraftKings has got it now, so it's good stuff. All right, Chris, so you're pretty much everywhere, man. If you can just kind of give us a second, talk about yourself a little bit, the places you write for, how long you've been doing this, just anything you wanted to mention.
Absolutely. So I've been doing this for 3-4 seasons now, and I've just been kind of accumulating websites like as I've kind of gone along. I don't really try and find a specific home. It's just where anybody can take me because I really enjoy writing about just different aspects of the game. I got into it with 4for4 because of my research into weather and how it impacts fantasy games. That's why my Twitter handle, Chris Allen FFWX, the WX for weather.
Nice.
So I did a ton of research into that during the 2017 and 2018 seasons. 2019 that kind of evolved into like a weekly segment where I was working with John Paulson, our head projections guy over at 4for4. Helping him figure out like how to tweak some of his projections on a weekly basis. So that's where that's kind of been, all that work's kind of been housed over at 4for4, even though I write a weekly column for that over at numberFire. But on top of that, I like to get into the strategy behind fantasy football from redraft perspective, like how do you attack certain positions, best ball, what construction is optimal. So I've been looking at that for the past couple of seasons. I mean, even since I've started dabbling in Dynasty, and that's what kind of got me over with the folks over at DLF, just looking at different aspects of the game and kind of thinking about it from a strategic perspective. And that's really how I like to break down the game because my technical background, I'm an engineer by trade. So pulling up spreadsheets, scraping data, trying to figure out how things connect from a numerical and quantifiable standpoint, that's really how I like to approach things. So using my skills from that standpoint has really gotten me to this point. So it's just, I don't know, it's kind of snowballed way past what I expected, but glad to be here.
Nice. And you mentioned your Twitter handle. Go ahead and give it to us one more time.
At Chris Allen FFWX.
Nice, guys. Go ahead and give him a follow, man. It's a great follow. Like you said, he writes for pretty much everywhere. Good stuff. All right, just real quick, a plug for our programming coming up here. We got Bob Lung coming on next week. He comes on this time of year for us to talk about consistency. So we're going to have him on, superstar in the industry. He's awesome. So he'll be on next Wednesday. And the Wednesday after that, I'll actually be on vacation. And it's the Ryan Takes Over the Podcast show. Ryan's going to run the show that week. I don't know what he's got planned. He's probably going to have some kind of party. It'll be crazy. So make sure you tune in for that on August 19th as well. Typically at this point, we do news and notes. But honestly, there's not a whole lot of news and notes to talk about right now. So we'll skip that. But I do want to give a shout out to our sponsor, BUSR.com, who typically sponsors the news and notes. But you can bet on anything from MMA, NASCAR, horse racing, all major sports like NFL, NBA. And you can join now by visiting BUSR.com/going-for-2. Receive a welcome bonus up to $500. Again, the website's BUSR.com/going-for-2. Get your welcome bonus and get those bets in, guys. All right, let's jump right into these wide receivers.
And now, Wide Receivers.
All right, so I got both of your rankings before the show here, and I got a couple questions to kind of compare your two rankings. And the first thing is, I mean, we basically had all the same guys. I mean, y'all had 11 of 11 guys were the same. You each had one guy that was different. Ryan, your guy that was different was Julio Jones. You had him in your top 12. I think you had him in your top 6, actually. Are you not worried about his age or Calvin Ridley?
I think with Julio, I'm playing that 3-year window. Like, I'm not really. I made a lot of trades and I moved a lot of guys, and I think Julio in that offense still can give you an amazing floor because he is their ball hog, man. He's a true elite receiver. He's still one of the best in the leagues. He didn't show any signs of slowing down last year. And even if he loses 10% of his production, he's still a top guy. And if I'm drafting to win now, even in Dynasty, I have no problem taking him as a second-round receiver because I know he's going to produce. And I know what I'm going to get for 2 to 3 years if I'm trying to win in that window.
Yeah, that's a good call. I like Julio Jones. I think I have in my rankings just outside of my top 12. It's like maybe 13 or 14. And Chris, the guy you had that was different was Allen Robinson, and I love A-Rob this year. So I'm curious as to your breakdown on Allen Robinson. What you think he's going to do this year?
Well, I mean, when it comes to Allen Robinson, I mean, can we think of a guy like a receiver that has so much talent, but yet has been with some of the worst quarterbacks
exactly.
in the league? I mean, I know the call has been like ever since he was in Jacksonville to get him with a good quarterback, and then he moves to Chicago and has almost a worse quarterback. I mean, I don't even understand, but still, the man has continued to produce. And if you're looking at, I mean, age-adjusted production, I mean, at his 26-27-year season, I mean, the man walked away with either the 4th or 5th highest target share in the league for wide receivers. I mean, 27% target share. I mean, we're talking about almost close to DeAndre Hopkins when he was still with the Texans. I mean, that level of production, or that level of target share within that offense. And so now his 3rd season now with Chicago, and even if we look at the competition for targets around him, I mean, who's really going to be challenging him for targets in that offense? Anthony Miller, Jimmy Graham, David Tariq Cohen. I mean, so if we're looking at the youth, what he can still do, considering he's at like the prime for wide receivers, where he's at within that offense. I mean, and again, the lack of competition for targets, and we've seen him produce time and time again. I mean, even going all the way back to like 2016 when he was still averaging about a 24% target share when he was still with Jacksonville. So I still think that he's capable of producing where he's at, even with some ceiling for a little bit more. So he's a guy that I'm willing to invest in, whether it's redraft or dynasty. So I think he belongs at least in that, even if he's at the back end of your wide receiver rankings or just right outside of it, I completely understand.
Yeah, I love Allen Robinson this year, like I mentioned, and you know, you mentioned his bad quarterbacks going back to Bortles back in Jacksonville, and of course Trubisky. There's a chance that Nick Foles might start this season, or at some point get the start. Is he the best quarterback that Robinson's had, you think, in his career?
Probably. I mean, which is not really saying all too much, but still, I mean, if that's the best they can do, I mean, I'm hoping at some point that maybe there's like an in-season trade and they wind up shipping them off somewhere where somebody can actually use them a bit better. But either way, I mean, Nick Foles is probably the best he's going to get.
Yeah, it's sad, but
no,
I mean,
that's real sad, man.
Yeah. I feel bad for the guy. It's funny though too, because he mentioned he wanted to re-sign with them. He wants to stay be in Chicago Bears, so maybe he just likes being up there. But yeah, it's crazy with the quarterback situation he's had in his career. All right, the next question I got for y'all. So obviously, Michael Thomas is the number one consensus receiver overall. Is there anybody that's sort of outside your top 12 that you think could sneak into the top 12 and then be possibly the number one overall this year? Is anybody that we won't see coming to end up as number one overall? Ryan, I'll go to you first.
I mean, is it a cop-out to say Odell Beckham since he's been that dude for a long time? Everybody's kind of just forgotten about him off of a year where the offense was a mess. They didn't know what the hell they were doing. They brought a new offensive coordinator in. They improved the line, which was just getting Baker destroyed. I mean, the chance of him popping back up to wide receiver 1 and being that top 3 is definitely something you can look at as a possibility right now. And I can definitely see him getting his way up there. And I don't know about competing for the number 1 spot, but I think Courtland Sutton has a chance to get enough volume in that offense, and an offense that's right now looking to throw the ball and has a touchdown upside where he can get himself into the top 12 here sooner rather than later.
I love it. I love the Sutton call and OBJ as well. I think OBJ is actually in my he's in my top 12. I think he's just at the number 12 spot. So I do think OBJ is going to have a pretty good bounce back season. What about
13? It was a cop out.
You're going with one spot more. Nice.
Yeah, I misread the question when I first looked at it. So yeah, it was just a cop out.
Well, no, I mean you read it right as far as being number 1 overall. But yeah, sneaking into the top 12, something I kind of added as I was talking. But yeah, someone that could end up number 1 overall, and you picked OBJ. I get that. That's a 12 spot jump up. What about you, Chris? What is a guy that's outside your top 12 that you think could possibly end up as the number 1 overall receiver?
I mean, I would have to agree with that. I mean, the other guy, I mean, I look at this from two different ways, and who could wind up being overall wide receiver or just a wide receiver 1 at year's end. But for me, kind of off the board, what about DK Metcalf? I mean, there's so much that's been made after he came into the league. I mean, of course, the 3-cone drill, get on out of here with all of that, because immediately after he got onto the field, he showed what he was capable of doing. I mean, I don't care about that 3-cone drill at all. I mean, the contested catch ability, like what he can do against press coverage. And now, I mean, if he has another year to get acclimated to what Russell Wilson wants out of that offense, Tyler Lockett, I mean, while he's still a great receiver, don't get me wrong, I still remember that highlight reel tippy-toe catch like at the back of the end zone that happened last season. But Tyler Lockett, again, he doesn't profile as your prototypical like alpha wide receiver within an offense. And so now if DK Metcalf coming out in his rookie season was able to earn a 19% target share within that offense, that ticks up anymore. I mean, we're getting into, 21, 22%. That's knocking on the door of guys like DJ Moore. I mean, that's knocking on some of those like low-end wide receiver 1s. And now if you're telling me he's attached to Russell Wilson for the next like 3-4 years, I mean, that production to me only looks like he's going to wind up ascending. And we've already seen his measurables. I mean, my God, look at the guy when he's out there on the field.
Yeah, he's huge.
So if he continues to move forward as a wide receiver, I mean, he can definitely push. I mean, he should definitely be, I would think, within the wide receiver 1 conversation at the end of this season. But I mean, in terms of range of outcomes, I could see it happening. Yeah,
I agree. I love DK Metcalf, and I was trying to pull it up, but I know if he's not the number 1 overall, he was in top 5 as far as end zone targets last year, and he had a low amount of touchdowns on those end zone targets. So if he converts a couple of more of those and gets some more volume in that offense, he's definitely going to be challenging for that top spot for sure. So I love that DK Metcalf call. The next question I had, we kind of already talked about him a little bit, so we're going to skip over that one. I was talking about OBJ not being in your top 12, but both of y'all kind of picked him as going to be your potential number 1 overall outside the top 12, so we'll skip over that one. We'll go to the wide receiver that it's not been in anybody's top 12. I looked at last year's stats, and I think he finished as a wide receiver 4 last year overall on the season, and he's literally in no one's top 12, not just the two of you, not just mine, but literally no one across the industry. Why does everybody hate on Cooper Kupp, Ryan?
I don't think it's to hate him. I mean, he's my wide receiver 14, so he's just outside of it. But it's just not – I feel like he's not an exciting play. He's a phenomenal floor. He's going to get an absolute ton of targets. But it just doesn't have that – he doesn't come off that explosive upside. And I'm not sure what it is about him. Maybe it's because he was drafted older. It's like a vendetta against him. he's a really good player. I just can't see him as an elite guy. That's why I don't have him in there. But I'm having a really good season. I'm having for 1,078 yards and 6 touchdowns. Like, he's just outside of it for me.
Yeah, yep.
And he's really solid. I don't think he can make that next step.
What about you, Chris? I mean, he's Goff's go-to target down there in the red zone sometimes. What is your thoughts on Cooper Kupp possibly getting into like that same top 5 position this year?
I guess it's hard for me to see that just based off the types of targets he sees like week in and week out. So without having that touchdown ceiling, I mean, the floor might be steady Eddie, but I really don't see him hitting that same ceiling as some of the other guys that we've been discussing in terms of like being in the conversation for wide receiver 1 targets. I mean, his ADOT is what, 7.5, 8, like somewhere in there. Like where for a prototypical wide receiver, you're looking at 9, 10, 11 yards down the field in terms of average depth of target. So, I mean, when we want to invest in wide receiver 1s or prototypical alpha wide receivers, we would like to see some sort of variety in the types of targets that they're getting. And with Allen Robinson, Odell Beckham, DJ Moore, Michael Thomas, all the way up to the top, you're getting that variety in the ways that they get open, the ways that they separate, and the ways they can win on the field. With Cooper Kupp, you really don't see that. And while he's been the benefit of being in that Sean McVay offense, like where they can scheme open guys like him in that shorter area range of the field, to me, it's just I would rather go with the talent of some of those other guys versus a guy that's, really just seems to fit within the offense or the scheme that he's in, which, again, great for fantasy. But again, I would much rather invest in some of those guys where we've seen that talent. We know that they can be used in a variety of ways to get open, regardless of the types of coverage or the types of defenses that they're facing each week.
Yeah, I agree with that there. I think, looking at year-end numbers sometimes can be a little misleading because sometimes it's did you play 16 games and were you involved in the offense long enough to sort of, accumulate enough stats, kind of like the Le'Veon Bell thing last year. Was he, if you owned him, he wasn't great any one week, but he, played basically every single game, ended up being just outside the top 12, and you wouldn't have thought that, but just because he played every game, he ended up being up there. So Cooper Kupp is one of those guys that's just, like you said, steady Eddie. He's just going to be consistent all year long, and that's something you can use in your fantasy leagues for sure. But that ceiling isn't there. That huge monster week winning type game is not going to come from Cooper Kupp. So I agree with that sentiment there. All right, real quick, guys. I want to plug one more thing. I want to plug once more the Grinders Championship. I got the belt right here. Again, guys, charity contest. I've mentioned it multiple times now. We got a charity contest going on now. It's for week 1 of the NFL. It's going to be played on DraftKings. We're taking entries for it now. We are up to about $500 on the GoFundMe page. If you want to sign up, just go to goingfor2.com/grinder. The link there is to sign up. The link there is for the GoFundMe page. You can donate, $5, $10, whatever you want to donate. Help us reach our goal. We got one more month of entries to take, and then we were going to be kicking that off on week 1. Hopefully, we have a fresh start to the NFL season, and we'll have a week 1 competition. But whenever that week 1 is, whether it's the first week of the season or if it's going to be delayed, whatever, we'll make sure to get that contest run. All right, guys. With that, let's go ahead and get to this or that.
It's time for this or that.
All right, guys. If you don't know how this works, if you listen to the show for a while, we're playing the ADP edition of the This or That contest, or what am I talking about here? The game. Sorry, I'm losing my words here. So basically how this works, this is going to be from a redraft perspective. I'm going to give you 2 guys, give you their ADP, and tell me which of the 2 guys you prefer at that ADP. I try to give them some kind of connection, and I name the matchup something so they kind of connect the guys we're talking about. So the first one I got, Ryan, is for you. I'm calling this one the Men of Steel. It's 2 Steelers. It's wide receiver 11, Juju Smith-Schuster, being drafted at the 310, versus wide receiver 36, Deontay Johnson at the 804. Which of those 2 guys do you prefer at their ADP?
Yeah, I'm taking Juju on that. Deontay there, he's in a big jumble of guys. And what we're seeing Juju go now at 310 is a value for him. He has top 10 upside, top 5. He has top 5 upside. Steelers' offense went from almost over 650 pass attempts to 510 when they went from Ben to Mason Rudolph. Mason Rudolph went to Deontay Johnson because he was working those short underneath routes, short 8-out routes, not going downfield, and that worked for him. Big Ben isn't that guy. he's going to take chances. He showed he trusts Juju. He had a 111 target season. He's proved he can be a high-end wide receiver one. And at 310, if I can get a guy who has top 10 potential at their position, I'm snagging him up because he has so much upside. And I think they're going to throw a lot more than last year because it was kind of just a blip for what that offense was.
Yeah, it's crazy how down people are on Juju. I mean, just last year, people were drafting him super high, coming off his other good season. Last year, he was down obviously because they had a quarterback situation there. But yeah, everybody's down on him, and I agree. I think that spot is a definite value. You can get a top receiver in the end of the third round. Do that all day.
We're at the end of the pendulum now with him going from super high to low,
yep,
where we want to buy him before he ends up in the middle somewhere.
Yep, agreed. All right, Chris, the matchup I have for you, I'm calling this one Hot Chubb Time Kareem. That is Nick Chubb at RB9. He's being drafted at the 111, back of the first round, versus RB27 Kareem Hunt, his teammate, of course, at the 507. Which guy you prefer out of these two at their ADP?
To be quite honest, I kind of prefer Kareem Hunt at his ADP. I mean, if you're looking at building your teams, and you kind of, the way that I normally approach like redraft teams is drafting via tiers. So looking at like Nick Chubb's tier, like at the back end of the first, I mean, there's a number of guys that I would probably look at, like either drafting either around him or ahead of him, that have more of a chance at being those dual threats like on the field. I mean, you want to talk about guys like Miles Sanders, Joe Mixon, I mean, Kenyon Drake, I mean, even Austin Eckler, possibly, if you want to get into that, if you want to dabble in that area. But I mean, those are the guys that kind of get drafted around him that I could see myself taking over him because of that ability for them to actually have a path to potential targets. Now with Nick Chubb, while he has played the role as pass catcher in the past, we've already seen his splits with and without Kareem Hunt like on the field, and how much his potential for targets drops the moment Kareem Hunt came back onto the field. So I would much rather pay for one of those other running backs like in the end of the first, like early second, and then wind up taking Kareem Hunt a few rounds later. So if I could wind up thinking about this structurally, go first, second round running back, so I wind up grabbing like one of those guys that I mentioned earlier, hammer wide receiver in the third and fourth round, and then possibly the fifth round, see if I can get Kareem Hunt in the back end of the fifth or sixth round, something like that.
Yeah, I like that. Because you're right. I mean, there's guys in that range with Nick Chubb that are basically in the same tier as him, and you could end up with both of them where you wouldn't want to own Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. But if you own Miles Sanders and Kareem Hunt, you're in a much better shape there. So, yeah, I agree. I think the way that you play the draft there would be perfect. All right, Ryan, next one's for you. I gave this one a Star Wars theme. We got Kylo Ren versus Drew Baca. This is QB4, Kyler Murray, going at the 5'10", versus QB23, Drew Lock at 1408. Who do you got at this ADP?
Yeah, this one messed me up a little bit. 'Cause, like, if we're talking a super flex, it's a completely different answer for me. But being we have it at the regular ADPs, I'm taking Drew Lock at that value. I'm a team late round quarterback. Drew Lock's the perfect high upside guy. He has a ton of weapons with Sutton, who we mentioned earlier in the show. They brought in Judy. They brought in Hamler. They have Fant. Man, there's so many weapons there for him to produce. They're going to protect him with the running game. They have backs who can catch the ball. I love the situation for him. And in the 14th round, that's basically a free player.
Yep.
And you pair him with a Phillip Rivers, you're sitting real pretty. If it's super flex, it's a different story. I'm going for the upside. I'm going for the solid player. But like this, it's Drew Lock all day.
Yeah, I agree. I'm team late quarterback as well, and I think that, like you said, not super flex. I'm taking the chance on Drew Lock because, I mean, you look at last year with Lamar Jackson, what that did for everybody. You got Lamar Jackson in pretty late rounds there, and he probably won your league. So, yeah, I agree. I think Drew Lock, I'm not trying to compare Drew Lock to Lamar Jackson, don't get me wrong there, but the late round quarterback gives you so much more value in order to build your teams that way. So, I agree 100%. All right, Chris, the next one's for you. I'm calling this one Hayden with Mr. Hooper. And that is two tight ends that, one of them used to be in Atlanta. One of them is currently in Atlanta. We got tight end 8, Hayden Hurst at the 708 versus tight end 13, Austin Hooper at the 1206. What do you have with these two guys?
Give me the guy that's attached to the Atlanta Falcons offense, to be quite honest. I don't typically subscribe to the theory behind vacated targets. I think Peter Howard has like beaten that into me like over the number of years he's been screaming at folks across Twitter about vacated targets. But I do like the offense that he's attached to. The Atlanta Falcons, they passed at one of the highest neutral passing rates in the league. They sat at about 64.3%. And so if a team would typically want to pass, like if score was irrelevant, I mean, that's the team that I would want to attach myself to. I mean, and also if you're looking at the target tree, I mean, it's Julio Jones, one of the best wide receivers in the game, Calvin Ridley, an ascending target, and then whom else after that? Are we really assuming that a lot of those passes are going to be sucked up by Todd Gurley, Ito Smith? I mean, there's still a chance for Hayden Hurst to earn a significant share of those targets. I'm not assuming he's going to reach the same heights that Hooper did in 2019, but still enough to wind up in that tight end one conversation. Whereas on the flip side, I mean, for Austin Hooper now in Cleveland, I mean, I can't really see myself talking myself into that same situation with him. I mean, look at the competition for targets around him. Odell Beckham, Jarvis Landry. I mean, David Njoku's supposed to still be there. We just talked about Kareem Hunt. I mean, we've got all those guys there. And on top of that, the offensive philosophy that they're now working with Kevin Stefanski coming over from Minnesota. Minnesota, opposite of Atlanta, I mean, they passed at one of the lowest neutral rates in the league this past season, about 55% neutral passing rate. So even if the Austin Hooper winds up earning a significant target share, how big is that pie as compared to Atlanta's? So I'd rather invest in Atlanta's offense if I possibly can.
I love it. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at as well. I think that the Browns, we saw that. I mean, Njoku's been there for how long? I know it's a new offense, and who knows how things are going to be there. But Baker doesn't look at the tight end very often, so I think that's a good call there. I think I like Hayden Hurst there. I think he was drafted to be the tight end for the Ravens until Mark Andrews just kind of came out of nowhere. So Hayden Hurst is still an athletic tight end that can be a good player. So love it. All right, this next one, Ryan, I have to explain a little bit the name I gave to it because it's a little confusing probably. The name of this one is The War of 1914, which, if you know history, that's World War I. But these two running backs that I've got here linked, they are linked in a couple different ways. One, they were drafted in the same year. Two, they're both going to be playing one of them played for Tom Brady. One of them going to be playing for Tom Brady this year. In the 19 and the 14 that I did there, 1914, Sonny Michel has 19 career receptions, and Ronald Jones has 14 career receptions. So these guys don't catch a lot of passes. And that's RB38 Sonny Michel at the 806 versus RB30 Ronald Jones at the 605. Which of these two guys do you prefer, Ryan?
Taking Ronald Jones. One of the reasons Sonny Michel's starting the season on the bump, so he may miss a few games, which I don't want any of that. And it kind of threw me out. The Ronald Jones had 31 receptions last year.
Did he?
Yeah.
What was I looking at then?
I have no idea. When you said that, I thought I had the wrong player stats up. So sorry to put it on blast. But Ronald Jones had the quietest 1,000 yards from scrimmage season last year we've seen, with only 200 touches. So 172 rushes and 31 receptions. Like, it wasn't bad, and that offense was a nightmare. I mean, they would never put themselves in scoring position in the red zone. There were turnovers. They were always playing from behind. And hopefully the improvement with adding Brady there and a little safer ball adds to his production, gets him some more red zone touches, because he wasn't producing there. You add a couple touchdowns instead of that 6 onto there, that's a whole different player in fantasy.
Yep.
So I like the upside there. I'm not a Keyshawn Vaughn guy. I don't think he's anything special as a back. And I don't think he does anything that Jones does. In fact, he's older than Jones, which is crazy. But I like Ronald Jones' talent still. I think the offense has gotten better because he's just going to have more opportunity. So I'm going to go with him.
All right. Yeah, I like that call. And you're right. I looked up his stats, and I don't know what I was looking at because I just not even close to 14 there. So that's on me. I must have done some bad research there. It happens sometimes. All right, Chris, you got the last one here. 2 receivers. We're calling this one Terry Had a Little Lamb. We're talking about wide receiver 23, Terry McLaurin, at the 507, and wide receiver 40, the rookie CD Lamb at the 905. Which of these two guys do you prefer?
Can I break the rules and take both? No, I guess if I had to choose, I've been more bullish on Amari Cooper this season anyway. I am like really excited about the Dallas Cowboys offense, but in this case, I'm going to have to go F1 at this point. I mean, if you look at his, I mean, like as rookie season, this might be me being a homer since Terry McLaurin, he comes from O State. I mean, go Buckeyes. That's my home area. But I mean, getting a chance to work with two different quarterbacks, still earning about a 19% target share as a rookie. On top of that, he had one of the higher ADOTs in the league at about 13 or 14 yards, and then also he had about a 31% slot rate. So, I mean, you mix all that together. I mean, how he's used, him being used both inside and outside, the number of targets he was able to earn in that offense, like as a rookie, to me, that smells of a wide receiver one. I mean, those are the aspects of a prototypical alpha wide receiver one that you would want to invest in. And so now, if we're talking about him still ascending within an offense, and again, now with the competition for targets, or lack thereof, really. Yeah. I mean, now, especially with the injury to Kelvin Harmon. And so now really who is supposed to really challenge him for targets? I mean, Steven Sims, I know he's now become the hot commodity in the fantasy industry, but I mean, he's really he works on the interior. Him and Trey Quinn, those are slot receivers. I mean, there's really not really that same competition for targets. So for me, give me that guy that can wind up with a 20+% target share in the 5th round. I'll take that all day.
Yeah, I agree 100% there. And I live here in Washington, D.C., so I hear all about Mr. Terry McLaurin, and they expect big things from him here. And I agree. And I think the connection that him and Haskins had, last year at the limited time that they were on the field together, I think is going to go a long way as well to building that chemistry and having a good season. So love it. All right, guys, quick commercial break. And when we come back, we got Breakout or Fakeout, and we'll do some stock up and stock down. So hold tight.
In the unpredictable world of fantasy sports, when all hope seems lost and chaos and confusion rule, one hero will rise. And change everything. Going for 2.com. Because no one remembers the extra point.
All right, guys, welcome back. I'm here with Chris and Ryan, and we are talking wide receivers tonight. Before we get to Breakout or Fakeout, I want to quickly plug one more thing tonight. I'm doing all kinds of plugs. But currently on Twitter right now, I have a eliminator contest going on right now for analysts that are under 1,000 followers. We're in the field of 32 right now, 32 finalists, and then we're going to narrow it down to just one guy. The one guy will be coming on the show as a guest at the end of August. So please go there. It's pinned to the top of my page. You can go there and just vote for your favorite analyst under 1,000. And the more important thing, guys, give them all a follow. Get them over 1,000 if we can. So check that out on my Twitter page. And now it's time for Breakout or Fakeout. I can find my drop.
Breakout or Fakeout?
All right, so we do this two different ways. Tonight, I'm going to give you a guy, and I want you to tell me if he's a breakout or fakeout instead of y'all bringing me your guys. So, Ryan, we're going to go to you first here. Breakout or fakeout, and Alan Lazard?
I've got breakout. He's a case of follow what the team does, and that explains more the coach speak. They didn't draft a wide receiver in the draft. They took good quarterback, running back. They didn't pick anybody in free agency other than Devin Funchess, and if that moves the needle for you, something's really wrong.
He opted out anyway.
And he opted out, exactly. Like, that team, they didn't make moves for a reason, and that's because they have their number 2 receiver that are Alan Lazard. He's a big body receiver. He's a guy I really liked coming out of college. He was a tactician route running. He has really good hands. He knows how to use his body in the red zone. He boxes out like a power forward. I like what he brings. And I think he can play. He played a little in the slot. He moved all over the place, and he's a nice compliment to Devontae Adams. And he's never gonna be. He's gonna be wide open all the time because Adams forces double teams because he's that kind of receiver. I like the situation there, and I trust that they didn't make any moves for that.
Yeah, and one more thing that I mentioned, I actually wrote an article about him, is Aaron Rodgers trusts him, and I think there was a game. I want to say it was a Monday night. I know it was a primetime game against the Detroit Lions. It was a 2nd and 5 at the 35. Rodgers threw a deep route on the left side of the field there and just missed Lazard. On the very next play, they ran exactly the same play. He threw exactly the same pass, and Lazard caught it. So I don't think there's no low lack of trust there. Rodgers trusted him to go right back to the same exact play, and they ended up getting a touchdown there. So I think that when you got Rodgers' trust, it's definitely a good thing in fantasy for sure. All right, Chris, breakout or fake out? Anthony Miller.
I'm going to go breakout here. I mean, I don't think, again, when we're talking about competition for targets within the Chicago offense, I mean, really it's Allen Robinson at the top and really everybody else after that. I mean, they're not really wide receivers, I mean, other than Anthony Miller that you would want to consider. I mean, are people really rushing out to roster, Javon Wims or any of those other guys that are there? I mean, in terms of pass catchers, the only other person past Anthony Miller that you're really considering is Tariq Cohen. That's about it. And with that, I mean, Anthony Miller himself, I mean, he profiles, I mean, he's been used typically as a slot receiver. I mean, but still, there were at least 2 or 3 weeks, like towards the back end of the season, once he got healthy, where both him and Allen Robinson were finishing either within the wide receiver 1 conversation or Anthony Miller was finishing as a wide receiver 2 or in the top 24. So with that upside and the fact that Chicago finished the 2019 season above average in terms of neutral passing rate, even if they do wind up making that switch to Nick Foles at some point during the season, I still think he can wind up finding chemistry playing alongside Allen Robinson and wind up coming up with at least a decent target share for himself, making him at least a part of that wide receiver 2 conversation. So I think where he's being drafted at now, massive value to me.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I love Anthony Miller. I've been buying him everywhere that I can. People are down on him a little bit. I know he's been a little bit hyped up recently, and his ADP starting to rise as well, but I definitely love me some Anthony Miller. Ryan, Hunter Renfrow, breakout or fake out?
I think it's fake out. He's going to get targets, but they're not going to be quality. We're going to see that Quincy Enunwa stat line with him. 16 targets, 10 catches, 46 yards. Like, he's not that guy. He got a lot last year because he was all they had in Oakland or Las Vegas, whatever we're calling it now. But they brought in Henry Ruggs. They brought in Brian Edwards. Those are 2 primetime receivers, a first and a third round pick. And they still have Tyrell Williams, and that moves him back where he should be at that wide receiver 3 spot. That is Renfrow down the chain, man. He's their 3rd or 4th receiver at best. And then you have Darren Waller there. I don't see the targets come. They're not going to throw the ball 600 times with Derek Carr. They also got Lynn Bowden, who's going to take away some targets. I just don't see it coming where he's really fantasy relevant.
Yeah, and just on that Lynn Bowden note, they actually had a note today that I was looking at. They said that Lynn Bowden might take snaps at quarterback this year, so that'll be interesting. Not related to Hunter Renfrow, but it was just kind of interesting.
I mean, he did it, though, in college.
Yep.
Essentially, he's going to be a wildcat guy. They're just going to move him around.
Yep, agreed. All right, Chris, we mentioned him a little bit earlier when you were talking about Terry McLaurin, but Steven Sims Jr., breakout or fake out?
Another breakout for me. I mean, and this is the other thing, like the same thing with Anthony Miller, so the same thing with Terry McLaurin now. If we're looking at wide receivers, I mean, both of the wide receiver ones, like for their respective offenses, are being drafted in the early rounds. I mean, Allen Robinson now has like essentially got 3rd round ADP, 4th round ADP.
Yep.
Terry McLaurin like shortly thereafter. But then their wide receiver 2s and their offenses are being drafted in the double-digit rounds after that, which to me doesn't make a ton of sense, especially given the types of targets that both Anthony Miller and Steven Sims gets. I mean, both of them, they operate primarily out of the slot. I mean, especially with Dwayne Haskins now taking over for that offense, that would, to me, signal a lot of targets like coming his way, some of the short area targets, those high leverage targets that he can get. And we saw last season, like how he broke out, at least in a sense, broke out last season with his after the catch ability once he was able to get some of those high leverage targets. So, I mean, if Terry McLaurin is now pressing for the wide receiver 1, at least to be in the wide receiver 1 conversation, to me, I think he already is anyway. Steven Sims should be firmly in that wide receiver 2 conversation, given what he did last year, what he's projected to do here in year 2, and just the way that offense is constructed. Yeah,
I'm with you on there. I've been buying him as well. I was buying him before the Kelvin Harmon injury, and I think that actually helps him a little bit. You know, you don't want to see injuries, but Steven Sims, I think, benefits from that. And he is an exciting player. I mean, you watch even his, I think he had a kick return and a punt return last year for touchdowns as well. So, I mean, he's an exciting player. You get him the ball in his hands, and he's going to do something with it. So I love that. All right, Ryan. Next one, last one for you. Breakout or fake out? Paris Campbell.
Yeah, this one kind of changed for me last night. We did a Colts preview, and I had JD from Go District I was talking to, and he kind of hyped me up on him a little bit. He was injured last year, didn't play much, and he went from a high draft capital guy to completely forgotten about, and everybody, including myself, was kind of looking at him as bust, but it's just a young guy getting injured and waiting to get the opportunity on the field. They upgraded quarterback, somebody who spreads the ball around, finds wide open receiver, and there's a good chance Campbell's going to be playing that slot role for them, where you have Edwards on the outside, T.Y. Hilton taking those and leaving everything open for him.
Yep.
I like him there. I think he can get high volume. He's an explosive runner. He's somebody who's really good with the ball in his hands. So they're going to have to find ways to manufacture touches for him, whether it's on end arounds, moving in the backfield. He's somebody that can move all around the field. He's going to play some huge games. I love him best ball, and I think he has some upside past that as well.
Yeah, and you mentioned T.Y. Hilton there, and he's had that injury now with the hamstring, and that seems to be his MO, for the last few years of his career. Paris Campbell might end up being the number one there or the number two in that conversation at least. So with T.Y. Hilton possibly getting some missed games there. So yeah, I think Paris Campbell has the opportunity for sure.
I meant Michael Pittman, not Edwards. I, for some reason, flip-flop them all the time in my brain.
It's all good. It's all good.
Every time.
Yeah, I think too, another thing, because I'm buying Nyheim Hines a lot because, Rivers likes to check down to the running backs, but Paris Campbell can fill that same role as well. So Rivers loves that check down. If there's no deep ball there, he checks it down a lot. So maybe Paris Campbell fills that role sometimes and gets him some more volume as well. All right, Chris, last one for you. Breakout or fake out? N'Keal Harry.
I don't know, man. I'm leaning towards breakout, but I'm cautiously optimistic. I mean, I was very high on N'Keal Harry as he was coming out. I mean, at least for me, like my wide receiver one prospect, like coming out in his class, and then I think I want to give him a pass. Just looking back on like his off season, the offense that he was instructed to learn. The quarterback that he was stuck with learning with. I mean, having to learn with Tom Brady and the perfection that's expected out of those receivers. I mean, there's a lot of ways I can retrofit narratives into why he didn't play up to his expectations, at least where we expected him to be. But at the same time, now we're looking at the Patriots of 2020. We've got Cam Newton coming in. I mean, I'm really hoping that Cam can really show us he's the Cam Newton of old. But still, I mean, this is a depleted roster. It's not the Patriots from a couple of years ago, especially with the number of players already opting out on the defensive side. So it's kind of a mixed bag regarding what we can expect out of the Patriots offense here in 2020. But I do have some hope. I mean, we've seen Cam Newton actually make fantasy stars out of some of those big-bodied receivers. Go back to Kelvin Benjamin, Devin Funchess. I mean, he's put some of those guys on the map for us. So if there's anybody on that offense that kind of fits the mold of those guys that Cam Newton has leaned on in years past when he was back in Carolina, N'Keal Harry kind of fits that. And the way that we've seen Bill Belichick kind of scheme and mold that offense around the strengths of the players that he has in front of him, I think there's a way that we can see more out of N'Keal Harry this season than we have in years past. So I'm buying. But again, I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm hoping that both of them wind up showing out here in 2020, but it's kind of hard to say at this point.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I have N'Keal Harry. He's probably my highest owned player across all of my leagues because he's going super late, whether it's Dynasty or even redraft leagues. He's going super late. You can get him as your receiver 5, and he has the upside to be a receiver 2 at least with Cam Newton there, like you mentioned. He likes those big receivers, and I do think you mentioned Kelvin Benjamin, Devin Funchess. I think N'Keal Harry is head and shoulders as far as more athletic than those two guys are. So I think that the possibility is definitely there that he leans on N'Keal Harry a little bit. So love it. All right, guys, let's do some stock up, stock down.
Stock up, stock down.
All right, the way this one works, I told you to get some guys before the show started. A stock up receiver is someone you think is rising right now, and of course a stock down, someone that might be falling for whatever reason. Ryan, we'll go to you first. Give me your stock up receiver.
I think I stock up receiver. First one I'm gonna have is Mike Williams. He's been like the most confusing borderline wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 for a while, having a 10-touchdown season followed by a 2-touchdown season.
Yeah.
Truth is, he lands somewhere between that. And same with his yardage between that 700 and 1,000 range. But he's a really good receiver, and he has a young quarterback coming in, whether sooner or later, Justin Herbert, who likes to sling the ball. He likes to throw it downfield. And a guy who likes to do that, like Herbert, likes to throw to big-bodied wide receivers. You can throw it up to Williams, let him make plays, and he looks like somebody they can trust. They don't have any other real weapons there other than him and Keenan Allen, and Hunter Henry, but like that kind of forces targets his way. And I'm buying a guy like that, so his stock's going up for me.
All right. Chris, give me your stock up receiver.
I guess I'm stuck on Ohio State wide receivers at this point. We talked about Paris Campbell earlier, Terry McLaurin. Now we're on to Curtis Samuel. I mean, I know a lot of, like, Curtis Samuel, like, he was stereotyped into being that deep threat, like, for the first couple of years when he was with Carolina. But now with Matt Rule and Joe Brady, I mean, there was a blurb that came out just a couple days ago where, I mean, they're talking about moving him around and actually using him in a similar fashion to the way that he was used at Ohio State. I mean, the guy's a converted running back. I mean, we saw actually in his rookie season where he was taking some of those end arounds, jet sweeps, and using some of that athletic ability in order to generate yardage on the field. And so if we can get back to that, where it's DJ Moore operating as the primary, Christian McCaffrey in the backfield, but yet now we're moving and scheming Curtis Samuel around, and that's what it sounds like Matt Rule is trying to do. That I can really see that really moving that offense forward and actually covering up some of the biggest weakness, which is their offensive line. So if they can do that, I mean, Curtis Samuel is definitely the key to doing it since he already understands a lot of the concepts that Matt Rule is bringing in. So for Curtis Samuel, he's a guy that I'm trying to draft as aggressively as possible because, again, if we've got DJ Moore going in the second, third round, like somewhere in there, but now Curtis Samuel isn't coming off the board until 9th, 10th, 11th round, yeah, I'll take that value all day. I mean, given how much that offense is predicated on the pass. And so I like his value at this point, so I'm trying to draft him as much as I can. Yeah,
good stuff. That's a good pull there because you're right. I mean, that rookie season, I think it was against Tampa Bay where he had that end around where, I mean, it was just a ridiculous run that he had for a touchdown, a cutback. And
I thought it was DJ Moore until I saw the name on the back.
Right, exactly. I mean, it was amazing. So, yeah, I think you're right. If they can use him that kind of fashion, I think his value would definitely be going up. Ryan, give me your stock down receiver.
I've got Devontae Parker. I know he's been really hyped this offseason. I mean, we've seen Parker hyped his whole career, normally from camp. Last year's finally from a good season. But when Preston Williams was on the field, Preston Williams was the man there. He dominated targets. He was their true number one receiver. And I think he comes back that way. I think Parker going as a wide receiver 2 is just getting a little bit high for him. I'd like to see him just to notch out wide receiver 3 range, but it makes him a guy whose stock's going down, and I'm probably not going to own because of it.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. It's funny that you talked about Devontae Parker when last year, I think in your waiver wire article, he was in there for like 6 or 7 straight weeks. No one wanted to add him. They weren't buying the Parker hype for some reason. So
I could not put him there because he was available in like 60% of leagues.
Yep, it was
for 10 weeks straight.
It was crazy. All right, Chris, give me your stock down receiver.
This one might come as a surprise to you guys, but at least the guy that I've been trying to, I guess, avoid just based off his value right now, it's DeAndre Hopkins. It's really hard for me to see how he winds up collecting the same number of targets as he did when he was still in Houston. I mean, with the way that the Cardinals offense is now constructed, I mean, we've got Christian Kirk now coming along. I mean, even if you think that's just the corpse of Larry Fitzgerald, I mean, both of them were both competing for, triple-digit targets this past season. And really the way that DeAndre Hopkins was able to actually make some of his production when he was with Texas, like in Texas, was his connection with Deshaun Watson. He doesn't have that similar connection with Kyler Murray. Like, Kyler Murray doesn't have the same trust in him to go up and get the ball as Deshaun did. So to me, it's hard for me to see him where he's being drafted as wide receiver 5 coming off the board, where we talked about a number of other wide receivers that are going in his range, which I have a little bit more confidence in. I mean, give me Julio Jones over him at this point. I mean, there are a number of other guys that I can argue with having a better outlook on their season. So it's hard for me to get behind DeAndre Hopkins, at least at his current cost. So at least for him, I've got to knock him down just a little bit.
All right, yeah, that's a good one. A bold call there. Stock down on DeAndre Hopkins, but I like it. I like being bold. We're actually doing pretty good on time here, so we're going to go back around the room one more time. Ryan, give me another stock up receiver.
I'm going with a rookie who's been going third round rookie drafts, and that's Van Jefferson. He is such a good fit for what the Rams do. He's a smooth route runner. He's a technician. He can move all around the field. He has phenomenal hands. He is like a baby clone of Bobby Woods. Like, he does all those things well that they love in a receiver. They run a ton of wide receiver threats. They've thrown the ball 600 plus times this year, 568 the year before. They throw the ball around, and they're missing Cooks. They've had tons of health concerns with their two main wide receivers there. He's a guy who's a plug and play for that offense if anything happens to Woods or Cup. I love Van Jefferson's skill set, and he landed the perfect offense to utilize him.
Yeah, I like him as well. I almost drafted him in my league because he kept falling. Unfortunately, I missed out on him, but I've watched some film on him, and I like what I see. Love it. Chris, give me another stock up receiver.
Stock up receiver for me is DJ Chark. Another guy that you can get like in those the fourth, fifth, sixth round, like somewhere in there, that has that wide receiver one upside in terms of target share. Because now, again, if you look at the Jacksonville Jaguars and their offense, I mean, again, who's really challenging Chark for targets? I mean, is Dede Westbrook? We've seen that we've been through that story.
Yes, we have.
Keelan Cole. I mean, Laviska Shenault. I mean, as much as I'm excited about Laviska Shenault, like from a dynasty perspective, I'm not expecting a massive contribution here in his rookie season. So really, it's Chark, and then it's all the rest of those other guys. And seeing him bounce back like in 2019, I mean, I'm really excited to see what he can do now with a full off season to work with Minshew, and especially with the way that defense is now essentially like crumbled. We've watched over the last 2 seasons. I mean, that vaunted Jacksonville Jaguars defense just completely fall apart. I think it was the playoff game against the Steelers a couple years back where they couldn't wind up making it in to the was it for the AFC Championship game or not? I forget. But either way, I mean, it was after that, and it was just the wheels completely came off afterwards.
Yep.
I mean, there was no way that they were going to make it there, and we've just seen year after year they've started to lose more and more pieces. Allen Robinson gone. I mean, and especially, Jalen Ramsey leaving last season. Yannick Ngakoue now once out. So to me, it looks like the potential for negative game scripts for Jacksonville is just going to be that much more. I mean, they're going to have to pass in order to keep up with the offenses that they're playing against. So if that's the case, more volume for all the receivers, but primarily it's going to be Chark. So I love where he's going right now in drafts because, again, I can see him having or being a part of that wide receiver one conversation just based off of the target share that he's going to get.
I love it, and I love Chark, and he came out of nowhere last year and just bust onto the scene. He was kind of one of those receivers that were considered a bust his rookie season, and then all of a sudden here he is blowing up. So those guys you're looking at this year, like the Paris Campbells we talked about, N'Keal Harry, there'll be a guy like that this year. I'm sure that no one's talking about that's going to have a good season.
It's all like you should have patience or something.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Patience in Dynasty. What's that?
It's a 1-year window.
Exactly.
That's it.
Ryan, give me one more stock down receiver.
I'm going with your boy on this. I feel bad about it. It's Darius Slayton.
Oof.
Slayton was really, I know, he was really good last year, and he's a talented player. But that offense has changed a good bit, and it's just from getting healthy. He benefited from Golden Tate playing 10 games, Sterling Shepard kind of playing 10 games, Ingram playing 6. Like, he didn't have any competition for targets, and he was getting force-fed the ball. He's competing with Cody Latimer, Benny Fowler for the ball. Like, there's a big jump, and I think he'll get the deep balls, but I think his scoring is going to be a lot more boom or bust and consistent this year. Like, I could see him having a nice season with 700, 800 yards, but it's going to come in like a roller coaster, leaps and bounds of where it's coming. So he's somebody I'm fading a little bit because I think you can sell him on what his value is.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I agree with you on that. I do think that he's going to be that up and down guy just because not only is he competing with all those guys you mentioned, but it's the Giants, and they weren't very good last year, and they're not going to be that great this year either. And, there is some, Barkley will be healthy this year, assuming. he'll take some stuff away from them as well. So I agree that he'll pretty boom or bust, but I still love his long-term outlook with Daniel Jones and that chemistry that they got. They started it last year in the preseason because, I played preseason DFS, and that was a stack that I had in one of my games, and, he looked to Slayton quite a bit. So I like that stack going forward.
I bet he's a buy by the end of the season now.
You think so?
I could see him having a little bit down, and then that's time to snatch him up. Because, it's not like those guys are all super young.
Right.
But, right now, I think he could find a nice dip on him.
Yep. All right, Chris, give me one more stock down receiver.
Again, I can't match the talent with this current situation, and that's Stephon Diggs. For me, when it comes to wide receiver talent, especially when it comes to route running, there is no other better guy with footwork. He has to be top 3 in the league, probably right next to Keenan Allen, maybe Julio. Somewhere along those lines in terms of being able to run those nice crisp routes that just leave receivers just looking every which way. But if you look at the situation he's in, it's not the same situation as he was with in Minnesota. Even though Minnesota was, passing at one of the lower rates in the league, at least he had at least a somewhat more accurate quarterback in Kirk Cousins. That's definitely not the case moving in Buffalo. Now he also has competition against with John Brown still being there. Both of those guys, both John Brown and Cole Beasley, for what they are, right. They're not going to be, these fantasy studs as John Brown was back in Arizona, or even what he could have been in Baltimore. And actually, side note, I really wish John Brown had stayed in Baltimore and had a chance to play with Lamar Jackson, but that's a whole other thing. Regardless, that's still competition for targets for Stephon Diggs. And so with the fact that Buffalo is already passing at a below average neutral passing rate within the league, it's hard for me to see him getting past some of that, getting into that wide receiver 1 conversation in terms of target share. And the guys that are going around him, according to FFPC ADP, Marquise Brown is going behind him. Michael Gallup is going right behind him. Some of those guys where I see the upside with either one of those that I would want to draft ahead of them. So at least for me, it's hard for me to reconcile talent with situation, where I know his talent shines much more than the guys that he's playing around. But again, given his situation, it's hard for me to want to draft him at his current ADP.
Yep, I'll agree with you on that one as well. There's a guy in my league that has been trying to sell Diggs since he went to Buffalo, and he's had no luck moving him because he wants the value that he got Diggs for originally, and he's just not going to get that value anymore because Buffalo's just not Minnesota. So agreed there. All right, it's time for the most popular segment of this show, the Forgotten Fantasy Player.
Get ready for GoingFor2.com's Forgotten Fantasy Player of the Week.
All right, Chris, you got to come strong here. We've had some good ones recently. Who is your Forgotten Fantasy Player?
All right, so I already mentioned earlier, I'm from Ohio. Actually, if I want to get even more technical, I root for Buckeye players in the NFL just because they're from the Ohio area. But when it comes to, college sports, I have to remind folks that I'm a Bearcat. I'm not a Buckeye. I graduated from the University of Cincinnati for my undergraduate studies. So I lived in the Cincinnati area for about 6 years. So I'm going to tell y'all a quick story. There's a pizza chain there in Cincinnati. It's called La Rosa's. And a number of us we'd go there after class and we'd hang out for a little bit. And one day we were there, and all of a sudden we're just eating pizza, talking this, that, and the other, and all of a sudden we hear this commotion. Chad Johnson had walked in through the back. He had grabbed a uniform for one of the people that was working there. One guy that was actually working there, his name was Chad, so he grabbed his name tag, donned the apron, put on the name tag, and then walked out onto the floor and was serving pizza to the folks for about 20-ish minutes before somebody noticed that it was actually Chad Johnson.
Nice.
So it's just one of those things where, as much of a clown as he was out in the field with the Ocho Cinco thing, him talking out, wearing the grills and so much, all that other stuff. And then you see the complete opposite, once AJ Green comes into the league, where he puts up, all these gaudy stats, Pro Bowl, All Pro, and all that without the mouth. Without the show around him. But for me, I still remember that guy. I still remember that guy that, regardless of how mad he made you, how outspoken he was on and off the field, the guy could still put up and play with the best of them. And with the way that Cincinnati like handled him, like when he was still a part of the Bengals, it still makes me mad to this day that they really didn't send him off, or he wasn't able to at least attain some of the notoriety that I feel that his talent bespoke. And now seeing when T. Higgins actually, like T. Higgins now has the 85 jersey, to me it's just like, man, they need to retire that number.
Yeah.
I can't see another Bengal wearing that number and like taking them seriously, because there's only one Ocho Cinco, and it's Chad Johnson for me.
Yeah, I love that. That's a good story. And he was that guy that, I think there was a story where he tweeted out, he was in some city, I don't remember what it was, Pittsburgh maybe. He tweeted out that he's in town, and the first person to tweet him back, he'll come pick him up and go shopping. And he went and bought 2 random kids some brand new shoes. You know what I mean? He was just that kind of, he was just a lot of fun. I have my Chad Johnson story. I actually played Madden against him, Madden Live, so that was kind of cool too. But he was just,
how bad he beat you?
He beat pretty bad actually, because this is back I think when my daughter was first born, and I wasn't playing as much Madden as I had in the past, and yeah, he whipped up on me pretty good. All right, guys, that wraps up the podcast. Let's go around the room really quick. Give us your Twitter handle if you want to plug anything. Chris, we'll go to you first.
So you can find me on Twitter at Chris Allen FFWX. Fellas, it's been wonderful. I appreciate y'all bringing me on. For folks that want to check out my work, you can primarily find me over at 4for4. A lot of my off-season research into quarterback drafting strategy, best ball roster construction, all that stuff is mostly housed over at 4for4. I'm actually just picked up a new side gig. I've been doing a little bit of work over at Football Guys with Sig Boom and the rest of them. So I might be doing a few pieces over there, like once the season gets started. But find me at 4for4, numberFire, doing a little dynasty work over with the folks over at DLF and also at Football Guys. So you can find me pretty much anywhere. I'm collecting websites like Thanos is collecting Infinity Stones. I mean, I just enjoy writing in the community, so come find me if you need me. Yeah,
and just to give a little bit of insight onto how the show opened up here. So Chris didn't give me his Skype name before the start of the show until the last minute. So I just kind of Googled Chris Allen, which is a pretty common name. But his Skype popped up because I had like 3 mutual friends with him, because he's everywhere. He's got everybody. So it was kind of just a shot in the dark, and there it was. All right, Ryan, give us what you got.
Find me here every Wednesday night, Armchair Fantasy Show. My takeover episode's coming soon. I'm going to have Matt Hicks and JD from Goat District on with me. It's going to be a good time. Find me at the Dynasty Draft Room. I just put out 2019, we redrafted the rookie class from that year for Dynasty, and I'm working on the 2018 for that. I have my all overrated team for Going for 2 coming out this week, where I hate on your favorite player. And we're doing at Dynasty Draft Room, a projection show where we're going through all 32 teams, doing projections for them. Chris was actually on there. That's where I met Chris, and we got him for this. And they've been a lot of fun, and we've had some good people on there as well.
Good stuff. As always, guys, you can find me on Twitter at JeffLambert77. Make sure you check out my Twitter feed right now with that Eliminator contest with all the analysts under 1,000 followers. Give them a follow, vote for your favorite one, and I think sometime at the end of August we'll have the winner on our show. So with that, guys, for Chris, for Ryan, I'm Jeff. We'll see y'all next week.